Have you ever wondered why it's always the 20-year-olds who are bungee jumping, sky surfing, extreme skiing, fire walking, whitewater rafting? Do you know why it's always the 20-year-olds? Because they have absolutely no fear. Neurologists have identified a small part of our brain right between the ears, in the middle of our brain, behind the eyes. They call it the amygdala. The amygdala is about the size of an almond, kind of looks like an almond. The amygdala's job is to remember every bad thing that happens to you in life. And in a 20-year-old, they just haven't had that many bad experiences, so they have absolutely no fear. In a 2-year-old, it's even less developed. That's why your 2-year-old will try to jump from the couch to the ottoman, and then they bounce off the ottoman and their head hits the corner of the coffee table, but then they get back on the couch. They're crying and they're bleeding, but they think it's just bad luck. It's just bad luck. Because their amygdala just isn't developed. I think skaters, I watch skaters, and I think they have no amygdala at all. I have a picture of a skater here on a roof. Whenever I see a skater on a roof, I'm like, you want to yell at them? No, it's not going to end well. You can tell them that. But this kid hasn't experienced any pain in life yet. He hasn't failed at anything. Maybe he hasn't failed a class, been fired from a job. Maybe he hasn't even had a job. He doesn't pay for his own insurance, so he doesn't have a care in the world. You know how it's going to end. Here, next picture. Just like that. Just like that. Or it's going to end like this. We have another one. Yes, right up against the pole. But you know what? They'll get right back up because they have no fear. They think it was just bad luck, and they'll try it again. I think as Christians, though, not just Christians, but all people, as we get older, we become more cautious. And today I want to talk about the need for courage. We've been talking about becoming leaders in this series that we've titled Becoming a Change Maker. And today I want to talk about finding courage, becoming a person of courage. This month we've been making our way through themes in Brad Lomenick's book, which is titled The Catalyst Leader. And by the way, next Sunday, you don't want to miss it. Brad Lomenick will be here speaking on ideas from this book. We have it in the coffee shop too, by the way. But today, I want to challenge you with this thought, to find courage. And I want to start with this. Stop playing it safe and take courage, because our tendency is to play it safe in whatever we do in life. And you're a leader. Probably everyone here leads in some capacity, whether it's in your home or at work, or you lead for a nonprofit, you lead in your business, or you lead here at church. But all of us lead. But courage is a leadership essential. You will never be a successful, let alone a great leader, without courage. So open your Bibles to Numbers chapter 14, and our text is going to be, not Numbers, I don't know why I said that, 1 Samuel chapter 14. And our text is going to come from 1 Samuel 14. But before we read it, let me just give you the context of the story so you know where we are. So Saul is the first king of Israel, and Saul is leading the Israelites back into battle against their arch nemesis, the notorious Philistines. You know the Philistines well. They're the same ones that David helped to defeat their giant Goliath. The Philistines are the nation. They keep losing battles, but they just won't go away. Nobody can stand them. That's why I say they're notorious. To give you a modern day analogy, just to put it in context, I would say in the NFL, it would be like the Raiders. You know, the Raiders, they never win and nobody can stand them, but they still have a franchise. We don't know how. You know, you can wear a lot of jerseys to church. We see them here. We see Cardinals jerseys, Patriots jerseys, Seahawks jersey. You can't wear a Raider jersey to church. You just can't. They're all criminals and thugs. And that's why they're moving to Las Vegas, the center of mob crime in America. It's fitting. It's absolutely fitting. So as we talk about the Philistines today, just picture someone in a Raiders jersey. That's all. That's all. And so anyway, so Saul is leading his people back into battle because the Philistines have taken their land and have encroached on Jerusalem. But as he goes to fight them, he's in a valley. They're up on a ridge. And then when his army gets close, his army sees that the Philistines have first they have 3,000 chariots. We read this in 1 Samuel 13. And then they have 6,000 men on horses. And then we read that their infantry is so massive they said it looks like the sand on the seashore. And so Saul's army starts to disappear. They get afraid. We read they start to hide in caves and wells and holes in the ground. Some of them even run to the other side. They're hoping to be on the other side with the Philistines when they win the battle. Saul's army dwindles down to 600. But his son is with him. And his son is only like 20 years old. And we read in 1 Samuel 14 that Jonathan, his son, gets bored. And Jonathan says to his armor bearer, his right-hand man, we could call him his wingman, he says to him, hey, let's go out and find some Philistines to fight. Don't tell anyone. That's what we read. And so he's got his right-hand man. It's like his one-man entourage. It's his one-man posse. And the guy says, let's go. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm putting Jonathan right about 20 years old. If you're raising a 20-year-old, and I've raised 3 so far, don't ever let them get bored, all right? My sons did great all the way through high school, but when they hit 20, I started to get calls like, this is just hypothetical, like a call from the Gilbert PD saying, hey, your son jumped in someone's swimming pool, and it's 1 a.m. I'm going, does he know them? No, he doesn't know them. And this is just hypothetical. Those are the things that your sons will do when they get bored. And then you ask your son, so why did you do this at 1 a.m? Dad, it was hot and we've been playing basketball. All right, do you know what a trespassing ticket costs? Can I just tell you? It's $248. Not that I know, I'm just saying hypothetically, when your 20-year-old gets bored, those things happen. Anyway, so Jonathan and his right-hand man, the armor bearer, they're bored. He says, let's go find some Philistines. So they go looking for trouble. And they get to the base of this Philistine outpost, we read, and they stop. And then Jonathan shares a plan. He says, okay, to his man. He says, to his one-man posse, he says, here's the plan. All right, we're gonna show ourselves to them. And when they see us, if they say, stay where you are, then we'll know God doesn't want us to fight them. But if they say, come up here and fight us, then we know that God will help us defeat them. That's the plan. And we read in 1 Samuel 14, his wingman hits his chest twice and said, you're my homie, I'm with you. That's what we read. Okay, something like that. And he says, I'm in. And so they start to climb. They step out from behind a rock or bushes, and the Philistines see them. And they say, hey, the Israeli dogs have come out of their holes. And then they said, why don't you come up here and we'll teach you a lesson? So Jonathan turns to his armor bearer. He says, see, God wants us to take them on. Let's go. And so they charge the hill, 2 of them, about to take on thousands. That's where we'll start this morning. 1 Samuel chapter 14, verse 1. One day Jonathan, son of Saul, said to his young armor bearer, let's go over to the Philistine outpost on the other side. But he did not tell his father. Of course he didn't. They never do, by the way. Perhaps, then he says this, circle this in your Bible, perhaps, maybe, there's a chance the Lord will act on our behalf. That's the weakest statement ever. He says, God might show up, he might not. But let's take him on anyway. You know what I love about this is Jonathan, unlike his father, is done playing it safe. I think our tendency is to play it safe, isn't it? We are naturally risk adverse. If we're honest, we live in a very risk adverse society. When your kids leave home in the morning, what do you say to them? You say, be careful, look both ways, don't talk to strangers, put on your seatbelt. None of you who are raising kids say to your kids, hey, when they're leaving the house, hey, go play in the street. Hey, seatbelts are for sissies. You don't say that. Hey, if a stranger stops and offers you a ride, I'm sure they just want to take you out for ice cream. Go ahead. We don't say that. That's so creepy too. But here's the thing. We start to live like that. Everything we do is risk adverse. We hedge and we buy insurance and we wear helmets, all hoping that we can make it through life safe and alive. I think we might be the only society in the world that on coffee cups it says hot beverage, warning. If someone buys a hot cup of coffee and they don't know it's hot, that's their problem. I'm going to tell you what needs a warning in our country are McDonald's apple pies, because that needs a hot warning. Because if you ever bite in one of those aggressively, it's like lava. You'll be drinking out of a straw for a week. You'll have so many blisters. That's what needs a warning. My wife and I, a while ago, were up in Tahoe. and we just wanted to rent bikes. So we went to a bike rental shop, and I didn't know it was also a bungee jumping shop. And so we go in the bike rental shop, and as we're waiting our turn, I see they have a monitor playing of people bungee jumping. And I see two guys on the monitor that they had videotaped, and they're strapped together on the edge of a bridge about to jump. So I asked the guy that worked there, I said, why are these guys tied together? He said, oh, the guy in the back is the instructor. And I was like, ooh. And I thought this, maybe it's just me, why do I need an instructor? When you jump, when you're halfway down, what's he going to tell you that's going to help? Absolutely nothing at that point. So I watched them jump, the two of them tied together, and the bungee stretch. And by the way, they're on the Sierra Nevada mountain bridge that goes over the Truckee River. It's one of the tallest bridges in the world. And the drop with a bungee is way over 200 feet. And that bungee stretches, and then they slam into the river and disappear. Then they pop back up. And the guy who's standing there with me watching, who works there, he goes, ooh, that was awesome, wasn't it? I go, yeah, really? I said, was that supposed to happen? And he says, no, not at all, but it was pretty cool, wasn't it? I was like, yeah. I said, are they okay? He said, oh, they just both had concussions. They're fine. And then he says, would you like to sign up for a bungee jump? And I said, sure, but could I have that instructor who failed physics class, who didn't know weight and mass? Of course I didn't, because my amygdala is still working. It was saying, no, run, these guys are going to kill you. Our tendency in life is to play it safe. But can I say this morning? Safe is for bankers. Safe is for preschools. Safe is for retirement homes. If you want to lead, you have to stop playing it safe. You have to be willing to take risk. That's why I say courage is a leadership essential. Every leader knows that they have to take risk. You can't do anything new without taking a risk. You can't do anything brave or bold or innovative without taking a risk. I have this key idea on the screen. Look at it with me. Hopefully this thought sticks with you today. Courage is a leadership essential. People follow courageous leaders. If you feel fear today, if you are short on courage, then ask God for the kind of courage that He fills us with. I think playing it safe is maybe the biggest obstacle to God using our lives the way He wants to do. So that's why I say stop playing it safe. If you play it safe, for example, let's say there's a middle-aged man in business, and he's been in the same career his entire life, but he feels God is calling him to do something new, to go into a new field. But fear keeps him in a job that he doesn't love anymore. Or maybe there's a young woman, and she's in an abusive relationship. She wants to get out of the relationship, but she doesn't think she can make it on her own. Fear keeps her a prisoner of the abuse. Or let's say simply there's a college student and she's graduating and she has all these dreams and ambitions, but her parents say no, and they keep pressuring, you need to take on this career. And fear keeps her from saying, I don't want to be an X-ray tech. I want to be a singer. But fear keeps her from saying that. I think all of us at some point in our lives, and probably most of us right now, struggle with some kind of fear. You heard Josh talk about the anxiety that he's wrestled with, and maybe even last night you couldn't sleep because you were afraid at the end of this month you won't be able to make your mortgage payment. Or maybe right now you fear for your marriage. It's been rocky and it's not getting any better. Or maybe you fear for your kids. You think your son or your daughter might be diagnosed with something. Or maybe you fear for your own health. Or maybe you fear that you're losing a friendship. Or maybe you fear that you're losing your job. It hasn't been going well. You think they're going to let you go and you don't know what you're going to do next. We all face those things that make us afraid. But this morning I want to start here. I want to remind you that you have a God that is all-powerful. That's how the Bible, in the opening pages of Genesis, God says, I am El Shaddai. El Shaddai means I am the Almighty One. I am the all-powerful one. When we talk about the attributes of God, we talk about His omnipotence, which means He is all-powerful. So if you're afraid, He is the mighty one. Ask Him for courage. If you are anxious, ask Him for power. He's the all-powerful one. I want to start here, though. Stop playing it safe. I'll say this next. God fills us with the courage that we lack on our own. I know that Jonathan sees this, so let's go back to our text, 1 Samuel chapter 14, verse 6. And Jonathan says to his young armor bearer, "Come, let's go over to the outpost of the Philistines. Perhaps, maybe, God will give them to us." And then he says this, it's a great line, "Nothing can hinder the Lord. Nothing can stop God from saving, whether by many or by few." He's saying it doesn't matter if there's just two of us. Nothing can stop God. Let's say if I ask you the question, what is the most commonly repeated phrase in the Bible? You might say, well, it's love God, or you might say it's love your neighbor, or you might say it's pray more. Those are all good phrases, but they're not the most common phrase in the Bible. The most common phrase in the Bible is, and it's 366 times, God says, "Fear not, have courage, be brave." I want to read you a few of these lines I brought with me, a few of my favorites, starting all the way back in the Old Testament. Joshua 1, Joshua says, "I don't think I can lead." And God says to him, "Be strong and courageous, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." David, who had been hiding in the caves of Adullam because he was afraid, he says, "You made me bold. You made me brave with strength in my soul." 2 Chronicles, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged of this king and his vast army, for there is a greater power with us than with him." I love that. Matthew 14, Jesus says to his disciples when they see him on the sea and they cried out in fear, Jesus spoke saying, "Take courage. Do not be afraid." In The Catalyst Leader, Brad writes about courage. And he says this. He says, "Live a life so courageous that other people will want to take notes on your life." How do you like that? So courageous that people around you want to take notes on your life. Then he quotes Nelson Mandela, the former president of South Africa and revolutionary against the apartheid regime. He says, "Courage is not the absence of fear. It's inspiring others to move beyond it." Great leaders know that the fear may never go away, but we lead in spite of it. As I talk about taking courage today, can I pause here and talk to anyone who's raising kids, fathers and mothers? If you're raising kids today, I want to talk to you. Your kids, more than anyone else, learn courage from you. They watch your life. They learn how to be brave or how to be afraid by watching you. And if you are going to raise godly sons and daughters, then you need more courage. It will take courage, for example, when prom rolls around in the spring and your son or your daughter starts to pack a backpack to go to prom. And you say, "Where are you going with the backpack?" And they say, "To a hotel with friends." Be brave and say, "No, you're not." And then sit down. Because when they pack a backpack to go to any prom, there's trouble. There's nothing but trouble. I'm just going to tell you that. But sit down with them and make a schedule for the night. All right, where are you for the first 10 minutes and then the next 10 minutes? You better know. And they're going to complain and whine. But be brave. All of you, mothers and fathers, you are the gatekeeper of your home. Some of you act like you don't know what's coming in on your kid's phone or on the cable channels. You better know. God put you there. Be brave enough to say, "We're going to block all of those channels on the TV," or "We're going to throttle the internet and stop all of this stuff from coming in." That's your job, not somebody else's. If you're raising, just going to talk to dads. If you're raising daughters, at some point when they get to high school, you're going to have someone's son showing up at your door wanting to take them out. So I just want to invite you to do this. Invest in a hockey mask and a chainsaw, all right? If you have daughters, you need to do this. And then answer the door. When the young man comes, just put on the hockey mask and start up the chainsaw, and then start the door. And scare him, intimidate him. Be bold and courageous. Ask him what their plans are that night. Make him have her back by 9:30. She'll complain the whole time, but it's okay, because you're in charge. I learned from my dad way back to be bold and to be brave. My dad, when I think about my dad, yes, I think he's a godly man. My second thought is my father was never afraid of anything or anyone. I remember once at night, we're driving on this dusty Liberian African road, and we come on a military checkpoint, and there had just been a coup d'etat, so attempted coup d'etat, so everyone's on edge. And the soldier comes up, and he had been drinking, and he asked my dad for a bribe to open the gate. Well, my father's been in Africa for almost 50 years now, and he's never paid anyone a quarter for a bribe. And he says, I'm not giving you anything. Open the gate. It's your job. And the guy makes him get out. So I get out just for backup. I don't have a gun, and he has a gun. And he has a gun, the M16, pointed at my dad, and he said, give me $1 or I'm going to make you dance. All he wanted was $1. And I'm like, hey, Dad, just give him the $1. And so to make him dance means he wants to shoot at my dad's feet to make him jump up and down. And when he said that and he has the gun pointed at my dad, you know what my father does? He looks him in the eye and he says, who's your commander? And so the guy said, okay, open the gate, open the gate. My dad wasn't afraid of anybody, guys with guns. When I was 12, I remember him talking about he was planning to have a meeting with the president of the country. Well, it sounded absurd. Like, how's that going to happen? The country of Liberia, where we live. My father wasn't an important man. He had been a farmer, a pear grower before we moved to Africa. He was a jungle missionary. He didn't have a PhD at the time. He wasn't the president of a university at the time. But he said he was going to schedule a meeting with the president. Sure enough, about 3 weeks later, he's in the president of the country's office, President Talbot, and he's telling him about this Christian university he wants to build. And the president says, this is the best thing that's happened to Liberia in years. Tell me what I can do to help you. And maybe you have a meeting that you've been afraid of scheduling with someone in your work, in your business. And I want to say, take courage, be bold. Your coworkers are watching you. Your children are watching you. Your sons and daughters are watching you. I want to say this next as we talk about courage. One of the great sabotagers of courage is criticism. I think maybe the fear of failure is overrated. I think what we're really afraid of is criticism, what someone might say. Let's go back to 1 Samuel chapter 14 and look at the criticism that the Philistines start to rain down on Jonathan and his armor bearer. Verse 11, so both of them showed themselves to the Philistine outpost. So they stood there kind of like in Home Alone. Hey, here we are. What are you going to do? And we read this. Look, they said, the Hebrews are crawling out of their holes they're hiding in. The men of the outpost shouted to Jonathan and his armor bearer, come up here and we'll teach you a lesson. Do you see this? They start to mock them and ridicule them. But here's the thing. Criticism, maybe there's good in it. Maybe criticism is an indication that you are actually doing something innovative and new, that you're actually doing something worthwhile. We're afraid of criticism. We're afraid that people will say something negative about us, but it's not that negative. In fact, one of my favorite business writers, Seth Godin, if you're in any kind of business, you have to read his book. Start with his book, Tribes. And in it, he writes about purple cows. He said, if you're producing anything, he said, produce a purple cow. He says, nobody talks about brown cows. Brown cows are ordinary. He says, but if you start to produce a purple cow, people will talk. His point is, people talk about innovative ideas. People talk about remarkable ideas and remarkable products and exciting products and exceptional ideas. People don't talk about boring ideas. And so don't be so afraid that someone might criticize your idea. I think we're always afraid that we'll present an idea at work and someone will say, hey, I'm really surprised you presented that without any really good data. Or someone might say, you're really going to invest in that when you aren't sure of the outcomes? And then we go, oh, maybe it was a bad idea. I remember when we first started planning this worship space where you're sitting right now, I had been in Lynchburg, Virginia, and I was in a coffee shop that in a small way was built like this. So I came back and I met with our pastors and staff, and I said, I have this idea. We've been talking about building a worship space. What if we built it like a giant New Testament living room, and we had seating neighborhoods, and it would be like sitting around a campfire when we sang. And they loved it. But the problem is, not just did our pastors and our staff love it, but then we started to talk about it publicly. But as soon as we did, the critics showed up and the skeptics, and people would ask me, they'd say, well, Palmer, have you ever spoken in a room where there's people on all sides? And I'm like, ooh, no, I haven't. And then someone would say, are you sure it will work? Do you have a plan B? We love plan Bs. And I'd say, no, I don't have a plan B. But I knew, and I kept talking about how we didn't want to just create a dark movie theater type auditorium with no windows. We wanted a space with light where you could see faces and you could know others and they could know you. And so we built this. And in spite of some of the skepticism and criticism, I think it's working. I think it is. And so far it seems to. I think it has. And I'm going to say in part because we have great leaders on our board who believe that God could use this space. But when I talk about criticism, here's the problem with it. It doesn't even have to actually happen in order for you to abandon an idea. Just the thought that you might be criticized will cause us to abandon an idea. I think weak leaders listen to the criticism. Weak leaders ask questions like, how can we do this and without anyone complaining? How can we do this and still keep everyone happy? Well, you can't. Bold leaders, strong leaders are innovative. They do new things. They do things that no one else is doing. We have, for example, a woman at the Grove who's a nutritionist with the Chandler Unified School District. And she's told me her story the last 3 or 4 years. We all know that in low-income neighborhoods, the school district provides free lunches and even free breakfasts for some kids who qualify for it. But then she noticed that they had kids that stayed till like 6 or 7 at night because their parents were working in after-school programs. And it hit her that those kids, they would have a lunch, but they would not get dinner. And she said she started to lay in bed at night going, man, the kids in Chandler and downtown Gilbert, they don't have much, they have almost nothing to eat until they get home at 7 or 8 at night. And so she started to ask permission to feed the kids in the after-school programs a dinner. And people resisted. They said, this will cost more money. People will have to work harder. But she pushed, and finally she got a yes. And then she got a grant to fund it. And now there's kids all over Chandler and Gilbert, all over the school district being fed who otherwise were not getting a meal because one woman was willing to take the criticism and willing to risk her reputation. So can I leave you with this piece of advice on this thought? Stop listening to the critics. I'm not saying don't take godly advice, don't be unteachable, but I'm saying stop listening to the critics who don't know you, who don't know your beautiful gifts, who don't know your dreams and how God has uniquely prepared you to do some things that no one else is doing. Don't listen to those kinds of critics. Here's a final thought this morning, and it's this. People follow courage. People follow courageous leaders, don't they? So we have this simple verse 7. So his armor bearer, when it's time to charge the hill, and he says, will you go with me? His armor bearer simply says, do all that you have in mind. His armor bearer said, go ahead. I'm with you, heart and soul. So Jonathan's leading, and the man's following. You know what I've heard said is if you're leading and no one's following, you're just taking a walk. That's what I've read somewhere. But Jonathan is leading, and he's courageous, and he has at least one guy following. Do you know great leaders, in fact, good leaders are scarce. It's really hard to find good leaders. Do you know why? Because not everyone wants the discomfort of leading. Leading is uncomfortable. Leading means that you need to stand up and present an idea in front of other people. That's not always comfortable. Or you have to present an idea that might be criticized, and that's uncomfortable. Or you might stand up and present an idea that means you're changing everything, or you're changing the status quo, and people don't like change, and they're going to complain, and that's uncomfortable. A lot of people don't like the discomfort of leading. That's why I say, great leaders are scarce. So my challenge to you is to accept the discomfort of leading and take courage, be brave. In business right now, there's a lot of people writing on body language. There's a whole study in nonverbal communication, what your body says when you're not speaking. One of the leading thinkers in the field is a woman named Amy Cuddy, and she's written a book titled Presence. And she says in Presence that your body language changes the dynamics of every meeting that you have, every presentation that you make. Your body language matters. And so at one point she says this, she says, before you go into a meeting that you need to present a bold idea, she says, make a Superman pose. So she says, find a quiet space. It could be your office, or if you share that with someone else, then find a cubicle in the bathroom. And she says, hold a Superman pose like this, with your chest out. Take a deep breath for 2 minutes, and then go in the meeting. She says, that'll change everything. I'm thinking about trying it. I haven't tried it yet. If I do try it, I'm never telling anyone. Not you, I'm not telling anyone. But she says it matters. Be brave, take courage. I think Jonathan and his armor bearer, they sit at the bottom of the hill like this. All right, he says, we're going to stand like Superman. 2 minutes. All right, on 4 we go. I think that's what happened. That's exactly what happened. Christine Kane, who leads A21 to end the sex trafficking of women and girls, she writes this: the purpose of life is not to arrive at death safely, so take courage. In the Chronicles of Narnia, C.S. Lewis writes about this lion named Aslan, and Susan, the girl in the story, she's stopped, or she's in hiding with the beavers, if you remember the scene. And she's with the beavers, and she's asking about Aslan, the lion, the picture of Jesus Christ. And she says this, she says, is he safe? And the beavers say, he's not safe, but he's good. You know, everything you do in the name of Jesus Christ, it may not feel safe, but it's good, and that's your calling. So how does the story end? And I'll finish with this thought, is that courage, in my opinion, is closely, tightly connected to faith. And every time in the Bible when we see people take steps of faith, that God rewards it. God blesses courageous living. So this story with Jonathan and his armor bearer, it ends like this. They charge the hill. They find 20 men at the top of the hill. They go and they fight them 2 on 20. The 2 of them win. The 20 end up on the ground. Some of the other Philistines from a distance, they see that their guys are going down. They see the carnage, and the Philistine army starts to flee, starts to abandon, starts to run and retreat. The 6,000 horseback riders, the 3,000 chariots, they all start heading the other direction. Saul and his men, we read, see what's going on from a distance. They're like, what happened there? What is causing these guys to run away? And so Saul charges after them with his 600 remaining men. And they win the battle against thousands and thousands. They do the impossible. Do you know why? Because one young 20-year-old took courage. One young 20-year-old stopped playing it safe. We can learn from 20-year-olds. My challenge to you as you leave today, when you step into your office tomorrow, when you walk into your home today, is to take courage. Be brave.